Parsha Shelach. The title of the shir is Never Give Up. Never give up. And what we read about shortly after the Chet HaMeraglim, the sin of the spies, we read about another incident that takes place in the Midbar at some point after the Chet HaMeraglim, and that is the story of the Mekoshesh Eitzim, the man who was caught gathering sticks on Shabbos. And as a result, he was executed because he was in violation of Shabbos law. The Torah says, "Vayu b'nei Yisrael BaMidbar," the Jews were in the desert. "Vayimtzeu ish mekoshesh eitzim b'yom haShabbos," and they find a man gathering sticks on the Shabbos day. Rashi tells us, what does it mean? "Vayu b'nei Yisrael BaMidbar vayimtzeu b'genusan shel Yisrael diber hakasuv." This is speaking disparagingly about the Jewish people. Why? What is the disparagement? Shelo shamru el Shabbos Rishona. Because they only observed one Shabbos, the very first Shabbos the Jewish people observed, which is that Shabbos when they first received the man. And uvashniya ba'zeh v'chilala. And on the second Shabbos, this person came and he violated the Shabbos. What Rashi is telling us is that even though the sin of the spies takes place in the second year of their sojourn in the desert, Rashi appears to be telling us, and this is not uncharacteristic of Rashi, Rashi says this many times, that there is no chronological order in the Torah, and therefore this story must have taken place much earlier in the history of the Jewish people than the Chet HaMeraglim. If this was indeed the second Shabbos that the Jewish people were in the Midbar, and it's telling us how low the Jewish people were, that even though Hashem had just given them the mitzvah of Shabbos right after they left Mitzrayim, they could only observe one Shabbos. They couldn't handle the second Shabbos. Already a second Shabbos was too much for them. So, of course, the question would be, why is it then over here? Why does the story appear here if it should have already been early on in the Sefer Shemos when they first left Egypt? That's question number one. Another question that we could ask is, what mitzvah comes immediately after the story of the Mekoshesh Eitzim? The mitzvah of tzitzit. Why does that mitzvah come right after the story of the Mekoshesh Eitzim? So there's another question that the Taz, Rabbi David Halevi, the very famous commentator on the Shulchan Aruch from the 17th century, asks. He has really a very important commentary, a super commentary to Rashi called the Divrei David. And in that commentary, he says that it would seem that this Rashi contradicts an explicit Gemara. The Gemara tells us, and this is in source number 3, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Ilmole Shamru Yisrael Shabbat Rishona, Lo Shalta Bahen Uma Vilasham. That had the Jewish people observed the first Shabbos, they would have been impervious to the attacks of any nation from that point forward. Shenemar, as it says, Vayhi bayom hashevi'i yatsu'u min ha'am lilkot, that it was on the 7th day that some people, right after Hashem had given them the mitzvah of Shabbos and told them about the man and said, collect a double portion on Friday, the Torah says there were a few Yidden that went out on Shabbos to collect the man. And then right afterwards it says, Uchasiv basrei vayavo Amalek, and it says right afterwards that Amalek came. So what do we see from this adjacency in the stories? We see that Amalek only came because the Jewish people didn't have the spiritual fortitude to observe even the very first Shabbos. So what we have here is a contradiction. Rashi tells us that they did observe the first Shabbos, they just couldn't hack the second Shabbos. But the Gemara tells us that they didn't even observe the very first Shabbos. So how do you explain Rashi? It's a very difficult Rashi. So let's see if we can offer an explanation. Yes, please.
We talk about, you mentioned that Bnei Israel couldn't even keep a second Shabbos, but you said it was a few people. How many were there? There were 600,000
The
men.
Torah doesn't tell us. It says, Yatsu'u min ha'am. So it could have just been 2 guys.
Yeah.
2 schleppers.
We get a bad rap for 2 guys who could have been part of Erev Rav, who were just bad guys.
Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh. That's the whole point. We're responsible for everyone. If even 2 people out of 600,000 could bring themselves to be Machal Shabbos after seeing the miracles, after Kriyas Yamsuf, and after all of this, it shows you that there's something wrong. There's something wrong. You know, if even one frum Jew could commit and could embezzle, then there's a problem with the rest of the Jewish community. If you don't mind my social commentary. If even one Jew is capable of theft, then there's a problem with all of us. Because that means that there's something we're all doing wrong. Something we're all doing wrong. And we have to take corrective measures. That's what the lesson is. We can't just say, oh, it's Yenim, right? That guy's an oisvarf. We don't have to deal with him. No, there's something endemic within our community. If even one of us is capable of doing something that goes so contrary to Hashem's will. That's the lesson.
Very high level of mankind.
High level of the Jew, high level of the Jewish people. There's an expectation that we all have to maintain a communal level. Anyway, so let's take a look. We don't have to see the entire text of the Divrei David, but if you see there's a little arrow, it's about 7 lines down. You see that arrow in the middle of the line? He says, V'nireh l'taretz. I'd like to suggest as follows, Al pima dekasvu ha-tosfos v'perak yesh nochalin. There's a Tosfos in Tractate Bava Basra who tells us the following. D'ma'aseh ha-mekoshesh haya b'techilas arboim miyad achar ma'aseh meraglim. That really the story of the Mekoshesh is not like we understood it initially from Rashi, that it took place when they first left Egypt. No. It took place immediately after the sin of the spies. Da'amru b'midrash de l'shem shamayim niskavein. The Midrash tells us that the Mekoshesh, this guy, this gatherer of sticks, was really doing it l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. He felt he needed to be an example for the rest of the Jewish people. Shahayu omrim Yisrael, keven shenigzar aleihem shelo yikasu la'aretz mimaseh meraglim. The Jewish people thought, their attitude was, all right, we're not going into Israel. We've just been told the terrible, horrible, tragic news. So shuv ein mechuyavim b'mitzvos. So they reasoned, all right, what's the point of doing mitzvahs anymore? There's a concept, the Gemara uses the term nisparda hachavila, that the bundle has been unbundled. Once the bundle has fallen apart, there's no point anymore. Game's over. What's the point? There's no reason for us to continue this game of mitzvahs. And therefore, Amad v'chilol Shabbos kidei sheyehareg v'yiru acherim ad kan l'shano. So what did he do? He says, no, that's exactly what I want to show people that is not correct. He went ahead and he violated one of the cardinal mitzvahs, which is Shabbos. And he said, I know that I'm going to get executed for this, but I want people to see that there still is a severity. There still is a price to pay for violating Hashem's commands. And he did it l'shem shemaim. He did it. He knew that he was going to get punished. But he wanted to do this to set an example, to show the Jewish people that you can't fall into the abyss of nihilism, of this sense of despair, of giving up. Okay, fine, so you lost out. You're not going into Israel. You're not going to make it. And the promised land is not going to be your destiny. It'll be for your children or your grandchildren. But does that mean that life is now over for you? There's no point in existence? And you don't have any meaning left in life? You still have mitzvahs to do. There is still purpose, even if you've been denied that thing that you've been anticipating and hoping and looking forward to your entire lives. Okay, so that's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean that your life is over. There's still meaning and purpose to your existence. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. So therefore, you've got to continue doing mitzvahs. That's exactly what the message of the Mekoshesh was to his countrymen.
So he sacrificed himself?
He sacrificed, he became a martyr. He martyred himself so that the Jewish people would understand that life has to go on, a life of mitzvahs has to go on. He says, V'al pizeh nicha kan. He says that would help us understand why the preface of this story is the Jewish people were in the desert. Obviously they were in the desert. Where else are they going to be? We just finished reading the story of the Meraglim. So where are they? Of course, the whole book is called BaMidbar. So where do you think the Jews are if they're not in the desert? So Ela Dahachi Kamer. But the word desert is a metaphor. It's not literally, it doesn't always just mean physically in a desert. Achar ma'aseh meraglim nasu Yisrael hefker kamidbar. That after the sin of the spies, the Jewish people became hefker like a midbar. We find in Midrashic literature that a desert is a place of desolation and just being totally lost, being completely aimless, being completely hefker. How do you translate hefker?
Without
Up for grabs, completely chaotic, completely entropic, completely without purpose, without ownership, without any sense of designation or purpose. That's what the Jewish people felt. Can you imagine this the shattering of their dreams, of their national dreams, at this moment when they're told they're not going to go into Eretz Yisrael? So that's what it means to be in a midbar. They were emotionally and mentally and spiritually in a midbar. That's what the Torah is telling us. And they were hefker. To become a duchli darshin in midbar demora al hefker. V'hachanami nagu hefker b'mitzvahs. And that's why they felt a complete sense of abandon when it came to the mitzvahs. Ubazeh v'chilul Shabbos. And that's why this Makoshesh violated the Shabbos. Kamo shemarnu nimsu v'chilul ha-Shabbos hayibot tzorach levatel ha-hefker. So he says he did it in order to remove that aimlessness and a sense of abandon that the Jewish people had. Ve'al kein amar shelo hayasham b'Shabbos rishana chilul Shabbos hatzorech levatel ha'hefker kazeh ki hayakodem hameraglim ad shebo Shabbos shniya v'hayabo hefker. So the Taz, I believe what he's saying in these two lines is as follows. The word first Shabbos and second Shabbos that Rashi is referring to does not mean chronologically the first and second Shabbatot of the Jewish people's sojourn in the desert. It means that there were two types of Shabbos. There was Shabbos pre-Meraglim and there was Shabbos post-Meraglim. Shabbos pre-Meraglim is the Jewish people filled with hope and anticipation and optimism for the future. Shabbos post-Meraglim, the second kind of Shabbos, is the Shabbos of despair and abandon and purposelessness. And that's what he means, that's what Rashi means, Shabbos Shniya. That if the Jewish people would have just observed that second Shabbos, that kind of Shabbos that you observe and serve the Ribbono Shel Olam, even though you feel that your own personal ambitions and aspirations and hopes are shattered. And yet despite that, you still serve the Ribbono Shel Olam, you still cling to Hashem, and you still serve Him with that devotion that is not predicated on the realization of your dreams. That's what Shabbos Shniya means, the second Shabbos, second kind of Shabbos. The Shabbos which is just for Shabbos' sake and not for the future. And so, Ve'al kein Omar, Shelo hayasham b'Shabbos rishana chilul Shabbos hatzorach levatel hefker kazeh. The first Shabbos, there may have been some oisvarvs who went ahead and were machalal Shabbos, but it wasn't for the sake of restoring that sense of purpose to the Jewish people. Ki hayakodem hameraglim, because all that took place on the previous Shabbatot was before the sin of the spies. Ad Shabbos Shabbos Shniya v'hayabo hefker, until the second Shabbos, the second kind of Shabbos, where there was complete abandon. That's the second kind of Shabbos. Al-Kain bazeh v'chilula, and that's why this man had to violate the Shabbos. Nimtza she'ein ze inyan lahahu de perak kol kisvei de shamari mishmiras din shel Shabbos ubazeh hayu nichshalim sheyatzu lil kot. He says, therefore, we're not talking about the technical observance of the laws of Shabbos, which is what the Gemara previously was talking about when it says that some people went out and gathered the mun. He says, "Avol kan mari de b'Shabbos shniya hayu muchrachim lechalol Shabbos l'shem shamayim ashen ki b'Shabbos rishona." The first Shabbos, there was no purpose, there was no need to be machalol Shabbos. Here, there was a need to be machalol Shabbos, and therefore, shelo shamru el Shabbos rishona. There was only an observance of the first Shabbos, but there was no observance of the second Shabbos, and that's why he felt the need to go ahead and demonstrate that even when you're in the second world of Shabbos, the second kind of Shabbos, second genre of Shabbos, he says if you don't take it seriously, there are still consequences, even when your dreams are dashed. Nimsa shebama denizkar kan genusan shel Yisrael lo mitzad shechad chilal Shabbos ela shayunogin hefker b'chol hamitzvos. He says, therefore, the disparagement of the Jewish people over here is not that a man went ahead and violated Shabbos. He was a noble man. He was an enlightened individual. He was a martyr who was Machavin L'Shem Shamayim. What was the disparagement of the Jewish people? It was everyone except the Mikoshesh. The Mikoshesh is not the embarrassment to the Jewish people. The embarrassment of the Jewish people is that everyone except the Mikoshesh felt the sense of abandon, and he did not. He was the only one who realized that there was still purpose to the observance of mitzvahs. What a powerful message this is, right? What a powerful lesson this is that no matter what we go through in our lives in this roller coaster that we call life, whether we're happy or sad, whether we've realized our dreams or we haven't, whether we're at a point in our lives when we've encountered tremendous and profound sometimes disappointment and failure, there's still great purpose and significance in the observance of Hashem's mitzvahs. That Shabbos, for the sake of Shabbos, is worthwhile. And Hashem still wants us to serve Him, regardless of how that fits in to the larger framework of our entire lives. Every single Shabbos is infinitely valuable, regardless of whether that's going to help us build ourselves up to that spiritual climax that we were always anticipating was going to happen in our lives, and then turns out that never really gets realized. So I think, and this is such a powerful Taz, it could have been written by someone in the 21st century, but he writes this, of course, in this medieval language, but you see the profundity of it nonetheless. I think that that's why the mitzvah of tzitzis comes right afterwards as well. Because what is the Mikoshesh demonstrating to people? No matter where you are in life, right? It's the mitzvot. No matter where you are in life, even if you're going to remain in a desert for the rest of your life, even if your dreams are not going to be realized, there still is purpose and significance to each and every mitzvah. And that's what the tzitzis are supposed to remind the Jewish people. Even if you're going to remain in the desert for the rest of your lives, there's a Shabbos, there's kashrus. Don't fall into that sense of yeush, into that sense of despair that tells you just to give up on everything. And a lot of people just give up on mitzvahs because they see the world around them collapse and crumble. That's not a reason to give up, because ultimately there will still always be that relationship between you and Hashem, no matter what else happens in the world, and even if your aspirations and hopes are not realized, but that doesn't affect the bond and the love that Hashem has for you. Even when our parents are always there for us, even if we don't succeed in life, even if we don't end up graduating, or we don't end up getting that tremendous successful move that we were anticipating in life. The parents will always still be there for us. They'll still always love us. There's that unconditional embrace that will always be there. And we have to remember that. We have to remember that when we experience lapses and dips in life, we can't succumb to the Yetzer Hara and just fall into despair. We have to pick ourselves up, right back up, because every single mitzvah that we do is a success, has a sense of purpose. Yes?
I'm confused. Everyone else except for the Mikoshesh Eitzim kept Shabbos. So why are you saying they were in the wrong?
Because they had a sense of despair.
But
that was their abandonment.
In spite of that despair, they kept Shabbos.
No, they kept Shabbos. You know how they kept Shabbos? They had a little kugel, they had a little cholent. They mumbled a few words of Kriyas Torah and of laning. Nocha Shabbos. Okay. But they didn't feel Shabbos. They didn't feel Shabbos. They didn't appreciate what a beautiful gift this special day was, a relationship and intimacy with the Ribono Shel Olam. That they couldn't, they just felt they were spiritually empty inside, and they couldn't muster that strength to really have a Shabbos.
But also, doesn't it say in number 3 that if they had kept that Shabbos, then they wouldn't have been in Gullus? So by the Mikoshesh Eitzim doing this, he ruined their whole future?
No. So the Taz's whole point is that these two Gemaras are totally different. The Taz, the Torah over here is talking about an event that happened a year later. This whole story happens after the Chet HaMeraglim, which is in the second year. It's months and months and months afterwards. The Gemara is talking about halachic observance of Shabbos, and here we're talking about the embracing of Shabbos amidst a sense of abandon, a sense of nihilism and despair. It's an existential Shabbos observance instead of a halachic Shabbos observance, is what he's saying.
Is this where the idea comes from, that song, Just One Shabbos and We'll All Be Free? The idea that if we all keep one Shabbos...
Right, because the idea is that we kept the first Shabbos, we just have to keep one more Shabbos. The Gemara does say, immediately after this statement of the Gemara in Shabbos, it says, if the Jewish people would observe 2 Shabbatot, then immediately they would be redeemed. There are different ways that the Mefarshim understand it. Some say that it only takes 1 Shabbos, because we can append that 1 Shabbos to the Shabbos that we observed when we first left Egypt. But there are others who argue, and they say that it has to be 2 consecutive Shabbatot. The reason why it has to be 2 consecutive Shabbatot is because the first Shabbos has a positive spiritual influence on the ensuing 6 days, and that builds up to a crescendo by the second Shabbos. So there are different ways to explain it. Yes?
I don't understand the whole logic of it, because if anything, if in fact a person goes out on Shabbos to be Mekoshesh Eitzim, he's reinforcing the idea that it doesn't matter, we can do whatever we want in the Midbar, and the only result that happened was he was killed. Yeah. So if anything, that's not going to give people a sense Shabbos is so wonderful, just make them free. If they still have to do it, they're going to get into trouble. So I don't see how it brings out any kind of existential love for Shabbos by what he did. If anything, it makes it worse, saying, he didn't see any point to keeping Shabbos, or he reinforced the idea it doesn't matter anymore.
I think that it jarred the Jewish people back to the realization that life does matter, because they all believed that Moshe Rabbeinu had communicated with Hashem. Hashem tells Moshe, Hotzeas HaMekalel, take him out and execute him. It's not that they just decided willy-nilly just to execute him. This was by divine decree. And when they understood that this was the Ratzon Hashem, that a person be executed for violating Shabbos, they understood that Shabbos does have significance in their lives. You're right, it's a negative lesson.
Maybe they just can punish the Mirag with a very harsh punishment. Now they see another person, so all they're saying is, okay, you have to keep Judaism, because otherwise we're going to be punished harshly. I mean, that's the message that I see.
Well, you could make that argument throughout the Chumash, is that throughout the sojourn in the desert, the Jewish people are being punished and not being rewarded. But let's consider that they're being rewarded every single day when they're living in the Midbar. The mun is falling, the clouds are surrounding them. They have a wonderful, miraculous existence during the entire 40 years. And these are the singular episodes of punishment. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is still telling them, life has purpose and meaning, and if there are no consequences to bad behavior, then life really doesn't have purpose. The only way that we understand that life has purpose is if there are consequences to us not living up to that purpose.
The whole point is we don't want to just be going through the motions because we're afraid of being punished. We want to feel the positive.
That's true. So there were Jews, undoubtedly, there were Jews who were on the lower madrega, who were motivated out of fear. But I think for many of the other Jews, perhaps the majority of the Jews of that generation who were on a very high level, this jarred them back to, get a hold of yourself, man, pull yourself together. Life is not over. Don't you realize this guy martyred himself to remind us that Shabbos and the mitzvahs still have purpose? Okay, work on it.
I just wanted to add about the mitzvot, that the mitzvah tzitzit came right after that, and I just wanted to add, so really tzitzit adds up to 613 is a mitzvot.
B'diuk, precisely.
Aksharim v'achukim.
That's exactly what Rashi says. That's exactly right. And you have the Petil Techelet to remind us that no matter where we are, the Techelet, which represents God's divine throne, is with us no matter where we go. Don't think that you have to be Dafka in the promised land in Eretz Yisrael to experience divinity. You can experience divinity no matter where you are. Yes?
Did the mud fall on Shabbos?
No. It fell on Friday, double portion. That's why we have 2 challahs.
No, I understand. It's just I wondered if it fell because you had the choice not to go and get it. You're not supposed to.
No, the Torah says in Parshas Shelach, Yatsu'u min ha'am lilkot v'lo matzau. People went out to look for it and they couldn't find it. So there are different ways of interpreting whether they observed Shabbos or not. Some say they went outside the tchum, they went outside the boundaries, and that's why they violated Shabbos. Yes, Michelle?
Regarding the despair and chaos and lack of framework, the mitzvot are the antithesis to a desert. Like the mitzvot provide framework and purpose.
Framework and structure, right?
And structure. That's
yes.
So, this person who went out to Mekoshesh, was trying to say that, we have mitzvot. You aren't emotionally destitute. You have the Torah and the mitzvot.
That's right. Exactly. Precisely. Yes. Yes.
Rabbi, so that's why the Torah was given to us in the desert, right? Because in the desert there is nothing. So Hashem gave us the Torah in the desert, that when you think like you're in the desert, that you don't have anything, at least, I mean, you have the Torah and then
That's right. That's right. And you're never alone.
Otherwise, He can give us the Torah in a beautiful place in Vancouver, like or Mexico, right?
Thank you to the lady from Mexico and Vancouver. Yes, right. Very well said. Yes.
So this question is in behalf of many of my friends that are afraid to speak. So the question is, I know tzitzits have different purposes, and you are making a connection here of awareness, right? So how come women then did not need the awareness of having to feel always like a physical connection that we're here, but at the same time we're not alone?
Right.
Because women have it in them.
Yeah.
The way the women were.
Okay, ladies, this is your time to shine. Yes.
No, I
Okay.
know I understand, but because the mitzvah tzitzit is mentioned right after this. So is it clear that back then, the way it is now, we don't feel that need of having a physical...
Correct. Women think with the sixth sense, and men think only with five senses. And as a result, at least this is what Chazal portrayed to us. I don't think that you can say it's with every single male and every single female, this distinction, but this is the general rule. And general rules are actually good things to make, because sometimes they help us create frameworks in life. But as a general rule, women have the ability to intuit ideas that are in the abstract without having to have physical representations of those abstract ideas. Men are much more four-dimensional, three-dimensional thinkers. They need the physical representations in order to keep themselves focused. You get distracted much more easily.
I guess
Yes.
women have to remind the men about tzitzit. Wouldn't you say?
That's what my mother used to do.
And I know, like, you know...
Daniel, don't forget to put on your tzitzis. That's what she used to say. Okay.